Hey guys, it's Amelia, but not the pilot, just Amelia. I am just about to start Atlas 6. I am so excited. This is like the only TikTok book that I have hope for. I feel like there has been sort of mixed reviews though. I've heard people hate it. I've heard people love it. I've heard it's a Harry Potter fanfiction turned book, which I don't think is true because I started doing some research on that because I was trying to figure out what fanfic it was, like what pairings. And it just seems like the author has previously written Harry Potter fanfiction, and this is very Harry Potter-esque. Besides that, I know literally nothing. I know it's dark academia. I know it's got some sort of wizardry magic school thing going on. That's all I know. And I'm really excited. So let's get into it. There will be tons of spoilers in this. This is basically a reading vlog where I am recapping the story and telling you my thoughts. So if you're looking for a recap before you start the second book, this is the video for you. If you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch this video. That's it. Let's go. Excuse me? You guys did not tell me that James Potter was in this book. No one told me. I'm 50 pages in and I literally had to shut the book and walk away I'm like losing my mind about the similarities. Nico de Verona is James Potter. Straight up. And Atlas is definitely Dumbledore. But I don't care about that right now. Right now we gotta talk about my Marauders popping up in this book, and I was not ready for it. Nico is James. Why? A, he's like a sunshine star boy, charismatic, everyone's obsessed with him, he's hot, he's got that curly hair, but also he's a pain in your butt. That's James Potter, that is. And he cares so much about everyone. He is so loud and obnoxious, but like he's a great friend and he's loyal and like will take care of you. That's James Potter. And then we have his two roommates. I literally closed the book. I stopped in the middle of like a page, which I never do because I could not take it anymore. So let's back up a little bit. We met all 6 characters. We have Libby Elizabeth Rhodes, who just graduated from NYU. She's dating Ezra, this random golden retriever man. She is rivals with Nico de Verona, who is a Cuban boy from like also at NYU, magical NYU, and they are rivals at school, and they both just graduated today, but they both got this letter of offer to the Atlas 6, and they're like, okay, and they're the youngest kids out of all the other people. The other people are like more adults, but they're still young adults. And then Libby and Nico are both physicists, which means that they can like control space and like warp things and move things and basically all of the basic like Harry Potter spells. But it also seems like everyone can do basic things like summoning stuff and like basic illusions and stuff is sort of what it seems like. I'm a little confused. So there's normal people, muggles, right? And then there's witches, which is like a small percentage of people, but then an even smaller percentage get into the university and are now considered medians. But if you're a witch, you could do basic spells, I guess. There's no wands, question mark. Then we have Parisa, who is from Iran, but lives in Paris, and she's just like the hottest, sexiest person alive, but she could read minds, and so she uses her beauty and her mind reading to get things done and destroy people. I love that for her. Then we have Tristan, who is from London. He's a London boy. His dad is a terrible person who's like not as good of a wizard as he is, and he is climbing the corporate ladder and dating a annoying Instagram model who is the daughter of the CEO because he wants to get that CEO title one day, and he's just like really average, but he can see through everyone's illusions, but he can't really do any other magic. And then we have Reina Mori. She is from Japan. I want to say Osaka, but she's from Japan and she is a naturalist, but she's like not like other naturalists that could just like manipulate plants. She's like energy for the plants, and the plants just like consume her energy and they grow, and she just like can hear plants' voices at all times, which is not normal. And she just likes to read, and she's a classics major and just wants to read all day. And then last but not least is Callum from South Africa, and we only get like 2 pages about him, so we really don't know what's going on, but he is an empath. But back to my boy, James Potter. So James Potter, Nico, is living in New York, and he has 2 roommates, and guess who they are? A man who could shift into a black dog That's Sirius Black. That's Sirius Black. And a half satyr, half mermaid man. His name is Gideon, who is basically Remus because he has this born genetic condition, half satyr, half mermaid. And so he's not quite human, but so he's like very ostracized from society, but also has a lot of physical ailments because of it, but also has a tragic backstory because his mother sucks and his dad is nowhere to be found, I guess. He's just really nice and kind, and James Potter will do anything to help him out. And as a result, Nico and Max, the dog, Sirius Black man, both shift into animal forms to go on dream adventures with Gideon together. And if that's not the Marauders, I literally had to close the book. He doesn't turn into a deer, though. He turns into a falcon, I think. That's the Marauders right there. I also love how Max is described. Max isn't, like, super relevant so far, but he's just described as, like, he's always there, and he's really annoying, but we love him. And I was like, that's Sirius Black. Anyway, so the other setup so far that we've learned, there is a secret society that is the Alexandrian Society that protects the Library of Alexandria, which has moved over the years and is now in the UK because the UK steals everything. Every couple years, every 10 years or something, the society inducts new members, and so they choose the best of the best, the most smart people from all over the world. And I really like this because I feel like usually in books they'll be like, we chose the best top people, you guys are the smartest, bestest in the whole world, and it's like everyone is from New York City, and you're like, there's no way that the odds of the best people in the entire world are all from, like, New York City or, like, the US. There's no way. Like, I'm sorry, what propaganda is that? So I really like that this one is actually diverse. They're actually from different places and have different backgrounds, and I love that. There's the Atlas 6. They're gonna choose 6 people, and like, they all live together in the little house for a year, and they do research and stuff, and then by the end of the year, they have to choose one person to eliminate, and I think it's pretty obvious that means kill them, but we'll see. And so Alice is, like, very clearly Dumbledore to me. He comes to each of them separately and says, like, hey, you guys, like, I'm requesting you to be in our society. Yes? And then they're like, okay, like, I'll do it. And then they all show up. They also meet Dalton, who is, like, this weird little man who also helps run the university school thing, Hogwarts, Alexandria Society. So Atlas and Dalton run it together, I guess. I don't know. You guys, this book is so good. It's so good. I'm losing my mind. I guess I read a good chunk yesterday, probably about 100 pages. I'm obsessed. The first magic battle that we've had, which was their, like, initiation thing that they're calling the, like, installation, which is a weird, dumb fantasy word. I don't know. I don't love that, but whatever. That was so exciting. It was, like, so well done. Nico was bending time, warping the ground to make all the people fall into it. Like, it was very creative, very interesting, actively visual. I loved it. We get 2 more little, like, backstory snippet scenes of Tristan going to go talk to Atlas and sort of grill him and be like, why should I want to stay? Like, give me more information. And then we get Parisa talking to Dalton and trying to, like, manipulate him, flirt with him. And Dalton's like, I'm not a useful pawn. You don't want me. And she's like, we'll see about that. And then we find out that Tristan and Parisa get on the elevator together to go back to London together and make out, have sex, whatever, and have an alliance already before they even get to the mansion. I don't know what it's called. The library mansion? Whatever. Hogwarts. So all 6 of them show up at the mansion, and we get a little tour-ish. It's not really explained, but there's just like, okay, there's a big dining room that they all eat in. They have a common room area with all of their bedrooms right off of that. It's giving Hogwarts, it's giving Gryffindor common room, it's giving a dorm style living. And then we also find out that Atlas, the man who called them all there, lives in the mansion and is the caretaker, and amongst many of his jobs, he is also sort of their teacher. And then Dalton is just sort of there. Still don't really know what he does. I am very interested in how his character is going to develop and, like, his secrets. I'm really liking how all of these characters, I can't really tell where the story's going to go, because all we know is that there's 6 of them,
and by the end of the year they have to eliminate one of them, which it's not been flat out stated. I don't think the characters know this, but I feel like it's pretty obvious plot-wise that elimination means they're going to die. So they have to choose one person to kill off, which is insane. I don't think any of them are going to handle it very well. But I, as a reader, feel like I can't figure out like which one is the weakest link, like who they would want to vote off at all, because they all seem so powerful and useful and whatnot. And I feel like the obvious choice, which has been stated, is that either Libby or Nico will be sent home because they're two physicists, so you don't need two, but it sort of seems like they do because they're better together, but also they both have sort of different like skill sets, qualities. So I'm very excited to see how that turns out. So far, so we had the infiltration in the middle of the night. I also love the scene where they're trying to figure out each other's powers and stuff, because we as the reader sort of know everyone's power. I really love how Callum is very veiled in secrecy, because his original chapter was maybe 2 pages long, so we know basically nothing about him besides the fact that he is an empath and he could control and feel other people's emotions. And we sort of are starting to slowly get like the extent of that and how dangerous and powerful it truly is, because when they're hanging out in the main room, when they first all meet each other and they're sussing each other out, Callum describes how grating Libby's personality is because she's anxious all the time. Relatable. And so he decides to use his power on her and make her not anxious, which is so funny, but also so invasive. And so the way they find that out is because Nico goes, "Why has Libby not said anything in 10 minutes? Which one of you is using your powers on her? Stop it." And we love a protective enemies to lovers boyfriend, because obviously I think that's where this is going. And then how they're all sort of horrified that Callum is using his powers on Libby without her consent, which is what he does all the time, and they haven't really realized that. And obviously Parisa is using her powers on all of them all the time as well, but it's different, and they asked both of them not to do that, but I feel like it's sort of like you can't. That's like asking someone not to breathe. It's their second nature. They're doing it automatically. They can't stop doing it. They could try to do it less, but it's always they could hear your thoughts anyway. They could feel your feelings anyway. They can't turn that off. Interesting moral dilemma. Obviously they all go to sleep, and Nico and Gideon have a little chat in their dreams, but apparently Gideon can't even get through the dreams because the place is so warded. I think that's really interesting. I also thought it was weird that they're told their only task is to figure out new warding systems for the building, and then they're just like, okay, yeah, we'll figure it out. And then they all go to bed. And I'm like, obviously something's gonna happen in the first night, but whatever. I also love that there's no rules and that they're all adults, and so they're not being babysat. Basically, it's just like Harry Potter. Dumbledore doesn't do anything. I love how Atlas is sort of established as the Dumbledore, but it's sort of establishing that Dumbledore sucks, basically. Atlas just shows up after the fact. He doesn't help. He's not giving them any advice. He teaches them stuff, and then he just disappears, and he, like, fucks off. He's like, you're on your own. Figure it out. I'll come in for some sage advice. A wizard shows up precisely when he means to. Like, that's literally... He's just the old wizard trope, which is honestly one of my favorite tropes. I think it's so consistently funny. But I love that we're, like, poking fun at this old wizard trope, how, like, Atlas is there as a plot device. They are obviously all woken up in the middle of the night by the wards are breaking, and Parisa can sense it, but also apparently Reina, her plans are going crazy. So they all figure out where the intruders are. They all split up into groups of 2, which was delicious. Love this. So they've just met, but now they've split up. So Nico and Reina go and head off and go do a really cool battle, right? And then we get Libby and Tristan, who actually end up pairing up really well. We have a little bit of like, oh, maybe this could be a romance, because Tristan can see through all illusions and everything, and Libby there's a bunch of illusions around, but he like aims her. It's very interesting. And then we never get Calum and Parisa's perspective. I'm so curious. I'm like dying to know what happened, because Parisa comes back shocked and Calum comes back completely normal and fine. And my current prediction is that he manipulated the emotions of the other person, did something like truly horrible, that obviously Parisa could read the minds and thoughts of everything, so she could like see what's going on. But I think that he like somehow had that person kill themselves or something even more horrible. And then I also am interested in when they first all met, since Tristan can see through all illusions, he looked Callum right in the eye and said something like, should we just keep it between us? And Callum goes, yeah, let's do that. And I'm so curious what it is. My first thought was that it was something like, oh, he's like trans or something like that. But now I'm almost like, maybe it's something like crazier, like not just like a superficial like appearance thing that he's doing, but maybe he's like an appearance thing to hide that he's like a gremlin or something, that he's like not human. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I'm very excited. And now they've just been studying. They invented wormholes, which is crazy. I also loved how that was described because it was like Nico figured it out, or black holes, sorry. He made a black hole and then immediately just starts using it to go to the kitchen. That's so James Potter coded. Like, tell me I'm wrong. That's like, they are James Potter. I also loved the conversation. This is the second dream moment we've had after the, I guess her name is Elif or something. Gideon's mom, the mermaid, shows up in Nico's bathroom and he's freaking out, which is very funny. And then he does like a little dream phone call with Gideon to be like, hey, your mom's crazy. And then he's chatting with Gideon and I love them so much. Also, they're so bromance. It's great. But I love this line is so James Potter coded. I was like, tell me I'm wrong. They both definitely said this. I'm rich and extremely handsome. Do you think I have my own problems? No, I do not. So let me have yours. Put me to use, I beg you. I was like, yes. So that's what's happening now. They're still doing physicality stuff, but they're supposed to move into the next different types of magic soon, I'm guessing. So let's go.
Oh my god, that dream scene with Parisa was crazy.
I am losing my mind. This book is so good. This book is so good. I mean, okay, so I have things to say. I didn't finish it, but I read a good chunk last night, but it was too late for me to film without waking up my entire household because I'm currently at home. Ooh. So, let's see what happened in this last chunk that I just read, because I really want to talk about the last chapter I just read, but we have to go in order. We have to stay the course. So, I'm gonna turn this light off, actually. No, it's still blurry. I don't know what's going on. Whatever. They've been studying. They're, like, learning stuff, right? So we got, they're doing some wormhole stuff. Libby figured out how to stop time by collaborating with Tristan. Very cool, very interesting, whatever. I do wish we would get, like, more of that, almost, like, more classwork. I understand, like, the pacing of this book is really good. It's, like, fast. We're moving. But I am sort of interested in also, like, the everyday monotonous classwork type of vibe. I feel like that's, like, a big thing in Harry Potter, and we're not super getting that. Like, I don't really know what their day-to-day is. And I want to know. So they're doing that, and then Nico, obviously, is dealing with Elif the mermaid, broken, so now he's like, we gotta seal up all the cracks, I need to keep her out. So he goes and does the most James Potter thing that he could possibly do by trying to fix it himself without anybody's help. And obviously he like almost dies trying to do it, but then Libby comes at the last second because she can sense the tremors and she helps him out. See, at this point though, I'm sort of thinking maybe they're not endgame, because maybe it's more of like a platonic besties, like they're like bestie soulmates type of thing, like they're enemies to friends. And I'm sort of thinking that maybe she's gonna end up with Tristan, maybe Nico Gideon are like a thing, but also maybe that's also platonic. I don't know. I don't read books very often where I don't know where it's going. I feel like once you read 100 books a year, you sort of figure out how the books go, you know? Like, it's pretty predictable how the plot is gonna go. And this one is, like, really, like, I don't know. It's like, I know the general, like, okay, we're gonna get to the end and someone's gonna have to die type of vibes, but also 2 of my predictions came true already. So I had predicted that Parisa was freaked out about Callum because he murdered that intruder person by, like, using his mental feeling things to make that person, like, murder themselves. And I was correct. And so she's really freaked out because she's like, he has no limits. Like, we both have similar, like, mind powers, but, like, I have my limits. I'm not gonna use it for evil against someone. Like, she just uses it to, like, find out information and, like, manipulate people. But she won't kill somebody. Like, that's where she draws the line. Where, like, Callum has no qualms. He'll do it. And he'll do it again, he said. But I just, like, that's his vibe. So she's sort of arguing that, like, she is better than him and he's very dangerous because he has no qualms and he's just, like, doing whatever he wants to manipulate people. So she thinks everyone should fear him, which everyone, like, sort of doesn't really care for him. Tristan is, like, slowly warming to him because Callum's manipulating hhim. So I guess we'll see how that goes. So we're starting to get some Dalton Parisa plot, which, oh my god, I'm losing my mind about this. It's so good. So Parisa obviously targeted Dalton from the start because for some reason she's like, he's gonna be useful, I need to get him. And so she's been flirting with him. They finally go and have sex, which she uses to find out information because she's been trying to get information from him, but he has such a hard mental wall that she, like, can't get through it. Like, he's really keeping up all of his walls and defenses around her, and she gets, like, little, like, snippets of things, but she's like, she really can't figure out what he's thinking at all, which I also think is very, like, maybe that's why she's interested in him, because she's, like, just trying to figure him out. So she uses sex to, like, bring down his defenses so that she could get those answers from him really quickly. But he's also, like, he's fully, like, sort of aware of this. Like, he is in control for the most part, I think. And he is also, like, some vulnerability. He gives her some answers back. So she gives him a truth about her, and then he'll be like, okay, the answer is this. Because, so she finds out that the answer is yes, someone is going to die at the end of this. So I was correct. Although I feel like that one was sort of obvious. I don't know if you guys also were able to predict that, but obviously eliminating one of the six means killing them, because obviously just a security breach alone, like, just letting someone go, like, leave this institute and just, like, go out into the world, obviously a security breach. So then she asked, like, well, then who did you kill and how did you guys do it? And she finds out that he killed this other guy and they did it with a knife, and it was because they were gonna kill him, and then he, like, convinced everyone not to, and to kill this other guy instead. And she's like, okay. And then she also asks him about the Forum, which is one of the infiltrators from the installation night. And he's like, oh, why do you want to know about them? Like, that was so long ago. And she's like, oh, no reason. I'm just curious about why they hate us so much. Like, are we actually the bad guys? Like, why are they trying to get in? And I think that's such an interesting thought. It's so good. I was like, ooh, that's such a good point. Because when you're reading a book, you're always like, oh yeah, like, these are the good guys. But they aren't. I don't think they are. This is so good. So that happens. And then, this chapter had me kicking and screaming. I was losing my mind. It was so good. So Dalton invites Parisa to come over and hang out one night. And he's like, okay, meet me in my room tonight. I'm going to test you. It's going to drain you a lot, though, just fair warning. And she's like, okay, cool. And she shows up, and he's already asleep, and there is, like, a timer thing on the table. And she immediately knows what to do. She flips over the timer. That's how much time she's going to have to do this test. And she, like, slips into his subconscious by falling asleep-ish next to him. When she gets into his subconscious, it's all briars, and she's like, LOL, how cliche. So she goes through all the briars, and she ends up in a maze. And she's like, LOL, okay, girl, let's go. And it's, like, a shifting maze, and there's different little things that she has to fight, but they're all, like, pretty basic. She's like, oh, these are all, like, simple animated forms. They're all the same, like, structure. They're all the same human, and they all have the same, like, 3 basic defense moves. So she's, like, easily defeating them. And then there's something about, like, mushrooms that, like, if she finds mushrooms, she could, like, pick them up, and then, like, video game style, like, the mushrooms will give her more time somehow. But then it's, like, the amount of time it takes to pick up the mushroom sort of detracts, so she has to, like, balance it. I was like, that's interesting, but I'm a little confused. At this point, this is when I was sort of like, I really like Olivia Blake's writing, but I wish she almost was, like, more flowery with it. Like, I wish we had more description and, like, emotion to the surroundings, if that makes any sense, because this is such a cool setup. It's very cool, but we're quickly moving through it. We're like, okay, this is what it is. She gets through it. Where I sort of wish it was like, this is what it is. It takes her hours. Like, this is what she smells. This is what she sees. This is whatever. Like, I sort of wish we, like, took our time through this, because it's so interesting. Anyway, she gets through really easily. This is also, I was like, it's such big Harry Potter vibes. Like, it's, like, the task. It's going through the task, and at the end of the task is, like, mind stuff. Like, it's just, oh, it is so good. It's so Harry Potter-y. And, of course, like, the maze, just, like, the Goblet of Fire,
Like, and then this end bit is very much like a pensive. I was like, oh, it's delicious. Anyway, so she gets through, and at the end of it is this big tower castle type of thing, and she's like, LOL, I have to rescue the damsel from the castle. How cliche, my dude. But she's also very impressed that he's able to construct all of these things, because this is not, like, telepathy is not his main thing. He's an animator, which they haven't really gone too much into, and I think there's something definitely there. Obviously, after this chapter, I was like, this is messed up. She's impressed that he's able to do all of these sort of defenses and like create these sort of complex mind things when this is not even his main study, his main area of research. So it's like, oh, that is a red flag. Something is happening. So she gets to the castle, and when she gets to the castle, she's like, oh, this bit is way more organized and like realistic and personal. It's more like a mind palace almost. So every single item and color and everything in the castle is very purposely chosen and designed. And she's like, where the rest was like sort of just like copy paste whatever mind defenses stuff, like this is his real mind. She's made it. And she doesn't have any time to go through the whole house and see what's going on, because sadly she's running out of time, obviously. So she quickly runs up the stairs and the hallways and gets to the top, and there's the 3 different towers. She's in the tower at the top, and there's 3 different doors. And she realizes, okay, obviously, like, I'm running out of time. She either has time to open all 3 doors and just see what each one is, or choose one, open it, and go into it and like explore it. And she's like, okay, whatever. Opens the first door, and she sees immediately that it's his idea of her. So he's like letting her see his true feelings for her. And she's like, I don't care about that. Like, let's move on. Goes to the next door. She opens the next door, and it is Dalton and the guy that he killed. Like, obviously that's what it is. And she goes, oh, interesting, okay. And then opens the third door and sees that the third door is information about the Forum, which is that society that was trying to break in but got away. The only one that got away during the installation. And she's like, ooh, I really want to know that, but it's more important that I learn the killing thing first. She goes back to the middle door, opens the middle door, goes into it, and pensive style goes into the memory. And so now she's in his memory. But is she? So she goes into the memory, and it's literally just like Harry Potter, where she like ends up in it physically, but like they can't see her, the people in the scene. Or can they? So it's Dalton, and then he's talking to the guy that they end up killing, I guess. And they're just like chatting, they're hanging out in his bedroom or whatever. And Dalton's sort of like trying to convince him, like, oh, well, I think there's a loophole to this. Like, if we could kill you, and then since I'm an animator, I could just bring you back to life, and then we'll have killed one person, but then we'll all get to survive. And the guy's like, well, I thought you've like don't know how to bring people back. And he's like, well, I just have never tried. And he's like obviously lying, like he's just like trying to make it acceptable, I guess. And then the memory Dalton turns and looks straight at Parisa and starts talking to her instead. So then she's having a conversation with memory him, which I was like, spooky, don't like it, very bad vibes, but very Harry Potter vibes. It was giving like when Dumbledore like makes eye contact with Harry in the Tom Riddle memory. I was like, ooh. And then they start having a conversation, and then the memory changes to where it's now Dalton in an office with Atlas, the Dumbledore guy, and Atlas is telling him, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but they're all gonna kill you. And I think that you are too valuable to be killed, so you need to figure that stuff out, convince them not to kill you. We need you because you have such a unique and like powerful talent that we need you. And Dalton's like, okay, got it. The scene shifts again. And now we're back to Parisa and like memory Dalton chatting. She starts like asking him questions about how he killed the other guy, and was like, oh, so did you bring him back? And he was like, nah, I don't think we did. She's like, you don't think we did? That's weird that you say it like that. And then he says, she asks him some more questions, and he basically is just like, yeah, like it seemed like it would be a lot of work to bring him back, so we just didn't. And she's like, oh. And then she realizes that there's something off about this memory Dalton. Like his mind, she realizes she hasn't really been reading the memory's mind. And something seems wrong about him. He's not an actual memory. He's animated. And then she's like, oh, what? And then she gets yoinked out of the dream and the memory. And she later realizes that it was Atlas that pulled her out and saved her because she was dying. Because she was there for too long. She was running out of time, and she went and saw this whole memory anyway.
And so she was in the dream, the memory for too long, and she was seizing, and Dalton is now over her, like shaking her, trying to wake her up, and she wakes up, and he was like, where were you? You never started my test. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, you never started the test. Like, where were you? And she's like, well, what was your test? And he was like, it was a bank vault with some blank papers in it, and you never showed up. And she's like, where was she? Where was she? And so now I'm convinced that she was in, like, the other half of Dalton's mind, because she says something like, oh, like, it felt like Dalton, but obviously, like, his brain is really, like, something is wrong. There's some sort of fray in his head. She definitely accessed, like, a different part of him that I don't think he knows about. And now I'm convinced that he's, like, Jekyll and hiding it over here. Like, he doesn't know that he has this whole other half to him, or maybe he does, he has like an inkling, but he has no way of like accessing it all. And I think Atlas is controlling him, basically. I think Atlas wanted to use him as an animator, but he sort of had some morals and whatnot. Or he doesn't actually have morals, that's just like his split personality thing going on. I don't know if like he already had the split personality of like vaguely evil, whatever, or like nice research guy. Like, I don't know if that was truly Jekyll and Hyde, or if Atlas like went into his mind, because Atlas is a mind person, and like split it himself. Like if Atlas made half of Dalton's mind like controllable, like if he's going in there and like fully controlling Dalton to do what he wants with the animation stuff. And that's where she was in that half. That's crazy. So I'm very excited. I was like, I need to read more, but it was really late, so I was like, I'm passing out. So instead, I read the first page of the next chapter, which had me peeing myself, because it's like, oh, it's Christmas break, like, we have to all go home now. And they're like, do we have to? Like, we don't even celebrate Christmas, we're wizards. Directly looks into the camera like The Office. I was losing my mind. If that's not a direct shot at Joanne, then I don't know what is, because that is so funny. That's like one of the biggest criticisms in Harry Potter is like, why do they celebrate Christmas at all? But they don't really celebrate Easter. At least it's not mentioned. Why are they celebrating Christmas? Does that mean they're Christian? Like, what? Why? So that's very funny. I will say I'm a little confused about the whole like median thing, because it seems like they're called medians because they are like they have extra powers than basic magical people. And basic magical people, I think, are called witches, not wizards. And so the witches can just do like prestidigitation type of stuff, like basic magic things, where if you have a higher aptitude for magic, you can be considered a median and then study specific things, like based on your proclivities, is what I think is happening. But I'm a little confused because it was never like fully explained or established. I don't know. So my future thoughts going forward is I now want to read this entire thing, but Harry Potterified, because it's giving such heavy Harry Potter vibes now, and I am obsessed. But I was thinking about like what houses they would be in. I think Nico and Libby would both be Gryffindor. Libby I'm not quite sure about. Libby I almost feel like would probably be more like a Ravenclaw. But one of my friends was like, no, she's just like Hermione. And I was like, okay, yeah. But I also feel like, I don't feel like Libby is particularly brave. We'll see. And then Raina I think is obviously Ravenclaw, easy, done. And then I'm not really sure about Tristan. I feel like I don't really know his like motivations and values completely, but I would say maybe Slytherin. Obviously Callum Slytherin, easy. I think Parisa is also Slytherin. End-wise, I'm assuming I still have a good chunk. I have like half of this book left. But I'm sort of thinking what's going to happen is they're going to do some more crazy magic things. They are going to end up at the end and they're going to have to kill someone. And I think it's going to have the same situation where like Callum is so powerful and unique but too dangerous that they're all going to decide that like he needs to be killed because he is like a threat to society. But Atlas wants to collect Callum and will try to collect Callum type of vibe. That's my thought. Also, was gonna say, I've been having this thought pretty much the entire time, and I don't know if it's gonna get answered. I hope they talk about this because it's sort of bothering me that they're doing these classes, sort of. There's a curriculum of sorts where, like, they were studying physicality at first, now they're studying, like, time stuff. Later, they're gonna do other things. So it seems like they have, like, a sort of basic curriculum that they should be following like every year that they do this, which I think is every 10 years, I think it said. They're doing a lot of like self-study, so they can study whatever they want within physicality or whatever they want within time, whatever. But I was sort of thinking about how like they basically invented wormholes and black holes. Like they proved how to do it and they know how to do it and like can do it now. And now they're like working on like stopping time and time machines and stuff. And I'm sort of wondering if this is what happens every year for Atlas 6. Like, is this like they're sort of like guided to do like, oh, we're doing physicality now and then we're doing time. And so like they're studying whatever they want, but in the end, like you're gonna come back to those big concepts, aren't you? So like 10 years ago when the last group of Atlas 6 came through, did they also invent wormholes and then also figure out how to stop time? Like Libby and Nico and whatever, they're like acting like these are like big inventions, and they are. It's very impressive that they were able to figure this out like on their own-ish, right? But it's also like, I wonder if Atlas and Dalton are sort of sitting there like, haha, like you guys just invented time machines? We have 20 of those. Like I'm wondering how like repetitive this cycle is where like they think they're inventing things but they're not. And I wonder if that's going to come up later, because it's also like they're in this archive, this like Library of Alexandria, and they have already talked about how they're inventing these things, but they like can't let the general public know, even though it'd be useful, because the general public doesn't always know what's best for them. Or like they might, like there's bad people out there and bad people might use it for bad things. And it's so interesting, because that's just, we're getting down to the basics of humanity now. Like, do you tell the public everything and let them make their own decisions, or do you have to refrain from telling people everything for the greater good? And that's so interesting. That's like, that's so good, because it's such a big debate, and there really is no like really correct answer. I mean, clearly it's so like relevant today, everything with COVID and whatnot. People had the answers but didn't want to get the COVID vaccines and stuff. Like there's stuff like this happening every day, and it's crazy. So I was very excited about these thoughts. I love this book. It's so good. I've just been thinking about that every time they're like, oh my god, we just invented time travel. I'm like, but did you? Or did they do that 10 years ago and put it away in the vault because they don't want anyone to know? That's the tea. Anyway, I'm gonna go continue reading because I am losing my mind. Okay, bye. I yet again wanted to finish yesterday and I did not. My hair looks super red today. Jesus Christ. I'm not done yet. I still have, I guess, like 40 pages left. Like I'm almost there, and it's not done yet, so I'm freaking out because it's just so good. I'm just losing my mind. I have been waiting for another Parisa chapter because last time I checked in with you guys, I had ended on that crazy Parisa chapter, and I'm like, I need to know more. Where's the rest of it? And sadly, I just finally hit it, and it wasn't that insightful. And she really, like, we have not talked about it since. She hasn't been thinking about it. She hasn't told anyone. She's really not sharing information. But this book is so good. It's delicious. And I had predicted earlier in the book who would be willing to kill and for what reasons, but I don't think I recorded that. I was like sending voice notes to my friend, I think. I don't think I recorded it for this video, but I had originally thought that Raina would not, because she's just vibing and she would not. But now we find out she's completely willing to, because she's willing to do it for the knowledge. I'm like, okay, girl. And then I predicted that Nico would probably do it, and that Tristan would be fine with it, Parisa would be fine with it, Callum clearly, and that Libby would not want to do it. So I was correct on that point. I also thought it was really interesting to have Libby find out last about the whole situation, because she is like too lawful good, if you will. Basically, if you're in a group and everyone else around you already knows something, A, but B has already also agreed to do something, because of like group mentality psychology, like you will agree to do it. So like she's now swayed to do it because they've all come to terms with this already. So now she just feels really left out, and she's already super insecure. So I was like, oh, it's so good. So I'm also really curious, like if these people would have come to like on their own. The only person that would immediately be fine with doing it is Callum. they weren't influenced by like the group psychology of it, would they be willing to kill for that knowledge? I don't know. Maybe Reyna, I guess. That's sort of surprising for me. But I think obviously Caleb. I don't know about the others. But also, I love the point that Libby is making, that they're all being like microdosed with power, so now they will do anything for it anyway, because they're all like addicts of this power, basically. So, delicious. I also love the conversations between Callum and Tristan, because they're like friends and they're very similar, but also they're not. And the whole conversation that Callum brings up, the fact that like just because he's gotten past the mental struggle of it too quickly, that he's considered worse. Like, get off your high horse, you're gonna kill someone either way, so what's the problem that I've gotten like through that quicker? That's like, like, I don't think he's correct, but that's such an interesting point to make, that he's just like, you're just being weaker for a longer time period, I'm just mentally moving forward with it, we have to do it, so I'm gonna do it. And I'm like, So they went home for Christmas, which was very funny to me, and they were all contacted by the forum. We still don't know what the forum is, because none of them like actually went through with it, because they've all been microdosing on this power, so they won't give it up. And then they all go back to the mansion, the archives, and Libby and Tristan and Parisa all get there first, and they have a little threesome, which I was losing my mind. I was not expecting that. I was like, what is this book? Okay, poly relationship. Parisa did that purposely to manipulate Libby and Tristan so that they have this bond, but they also have a bond with Parisa since she like set it all up. That was mastermind. Parisa is a mastermind, genius. She really, ooh. But I still believe that Callum is the bigger threat. Like, I don't know what it is. It's like Parisa, I feel like, has a useful skill, but she has limits, and that's why I'm like, okay, she's fine. Where Callum doesn't seem to have those limits, and he has evil sympathies, I guess you could say. So I feel like he's the one they should get rid of. I still believe it. And it's interesting. And then we haven't talked about Ezra since. And I was like, oh, I have so many thoughts on Ezra already, because in the beginning, it's like established that he's like a golden retriever boyfriend and Nico doesn't like him, and like he's just sort of there, and he's like not as good at magic as they are, but he was at the NYU school, and we don't really find out what he can do. We just know that he's average, which is apparently not true. And I think that's so interesting. But I also was thinking about how Ezra is basically like every book boyfriend that I feel like has existed in like fantasy ever since I was growing up. Like, all of the boys were him. The fact that he's like, he's so nice, he's so caring, he's gonna listen, he's a golden retriever boyfriend, he's hot, whatever. But the fact that he's like overly protective to like an annoying degree, and that's supposed to be seen as sweet, but Libby is slowly starting to like, it's getting on her nerves, where she's like, I can handle myself, and he's like, I know you can handle yourself, but I'm still protective of you. It's like, shut up. Like, red flag. That's like such an interesting character, especially for me as a reader, because I feel like I've grown up dating these guys in books. Not in real life, guys, come on. Every book boyfriend I feel like that I've ever read about, like every single one when I was a kid, growing up, all throughout my teens, even now, they're always like Ezra. And that's the tea. And that's on why Olivie Blake is an amazing writer. I still will say I wish there was more details going on, because there are moments where I'm like, wait, what just happened? Like, slow down a little bit. Although I will say, I don't know if this is one of her later books in comparison to the other 3 that I read. Like, I don't know what order she actually read them in or wrote them in, but I will say that this one has better sentence structures, because in the other 3 that I read, I kept complaining. I don't think I made videos on them. One of my bigger problems with her other books is I loved them, the concepts were really interesting and the characters really cool, but the sentence structures, some of them were like one whole page was one sentence, just one really long run-on sentence, and I was like, did no editor make her stop this? Like, what? This is not, like, you can't read this. It's I had to read them like 4 or 5 times to actually understand what she was saying. Like, just put a period, just break it up just a little bit. So that happened. And then we've just gotten one more Ezra chapter and one more Parisa chapter that has me losing my mind. So now everyone knows that someone has to die. They're all pretty much set on Callum. Sort of doesn't know. I mean, he knows, but like, I think he still feels like he's got a chance, or at least that he could manipulate everyone into being on his side, which is so crazy. I don't know why they didn't like think of that either. The fact that like they really need to guard their emotions and do it quickly so that Callum can't influence them. I also really liked the whole thing with Parisa talking about like you have to carry a talisman on you so that you know you're awake and in reality and not being influenced. And so Nico and Tristan both start doing this. It's giving Inception, and I really like that. It's a very interesting like concept. I feel like that's not overly used, at least in stuff that I've read. So I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. There's a good thing to add, sure. So Parisa goes to Dalton again, and she yet again goes into his mind, and she's only in there for like 5 minutes, but she finds the area where she was again, and she finds that version of Dalton again. And he's still unhinged as always and is like, I need to get out. Like, please let me out. Like, is Atlas still controlling things? Like, what is going on? And then she gets yoinked out again. And they're both, like, in distress, Dalton and Parisa. Like, apparently going wherever she went is very difficult. Dalton's like, what'd you discover? And she's like, I have no answers, just more questions. And then Atlas shows up at the door. And I was like, oh, let's go. And so she has a conversation with Atlas, who's basically like, I mean, it's not worth it to go into his head. I mean, you could dig around if you want, but you're not gonna find anything. You just like probably shouldn't. And she doesn't trust Atlas at this point. I mean, I don't trust Atlas. Who does? He's freaking Dumbledore, for crying out loud. And basically Atlas is like, no, like we are basically the same person, but like he doesn't seem to like respect her. And they have like the same skill set. And she always thought like, oh, like we're equals, we're on the same level type of deal. And it's clear that like he doesn't exactly feel the same way. I also think it's interesting how they use like mental conversation in this little interaction, because apparently when they're talking in their thoughts, you can't lie as easily. So she's trying to talk to him in thoughts, but he keeps answering out loud, which is easier to lie when you're lying out loud. So very interesting. So I'm so excited to see what happens. And then we get one more chapter with Ezra, which had me losing my mind. It's called An Interlude, and it is Ezra talking to Atlas. What does that mean? Of all the things that, like, I could have guessed Ezra is, like, doing, that was not one of them. Like, I just don't, yeah, I don't even know. Like, I have literally no predictions now. My head is completely empty. Like, how does Ezra know Atlas? Is Ezra actually, like, an ancient being? Because he's supposed to be basically her age, or I think he's a little bit older than Libby. So, like, he's 22 or something, like, 23? So, he's like, that means he probably didn't go through the Atlas cycle already, because he's too young, I would think. Unless, like, he's the son of someone who did it. Unless is he Atlas's son? Also, this is sort of funny, but I don't think there was a description of what Atlas looks like, but in my head, he looks like Morpheus from The Matrix. So, I don't know why. That's just who he is in my head. I was talking about this book with my friend who's also reading it right now, and she said that the plants, Raina's plants, when they're talking to her, have RuPaul's voice in her head, which is so funny to me. And she said it's because the plants are always screaming mother. All right, I'm gonna finish this book now because I'm losing my mind. I need to know what happens. And then I'm gonna go start the next two. I have literally no predictions. I don't know how this book is gonna end. I'm hoping everything goes to plan and Caleb dies and, like, they all get to stay. I don't know, man. I don't know. I just spilled an entire cup of tea all over my book because I was in so much shock that Libby died. What has just happened? Tristan went to kill Callum, but then obviously couldn't because he was being manipulated, which I don't know why they even left him to do that by himself in the first place. But then Callum went to go kill Tristan, and then he didn't. But then there's someone in the house, I'm assuming it's Ezra, obviously, who attacked Libby, and now they just found her dead? This book is crazy. I'm losing my mind. I'm losing my mind. That was so good. Oh my god. Okay, so I guess the last time I just checked in was like an hour ago when Tristan was supposed to kill Callum but didn't successfully, and then Callum was gonna kill Tristan, and we end the chapter thinking that Tristan got stabbed, but he didn't. And then like 2 or 3 chapters later, we hear that Libby's hanging out with Nico and then goes into her own room by herself. This is a mistake. I don't know why they're just all hanging out in separate rooms. I feel like this was very poorly planned. They're supposed to be the smartest people. No, what are they doing? So she's in her room and then she feels a sudden change, and she also realizes I should probably go help Tristan because we shouldn't have left him alone in the first place. And right as she's about to do that, she gets snatched, and we find out that she dies. And then we find out that Tristan and Callum are both alive. They are mad at each other, but they're both alive. And everyone else is still alive. And they go into her room, and she's dead on the ground. Dead. And then Tristan says, no, that's not her. And that's when I spilled all my tea all over my stuff. But anyway, so we find out that's not her. That was an animation, which Dalton knows. The only other person that could make that animation is him. So we're like, okay, so he has the Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. Did he make that for someone and he doesn't know? He doesn't remember? Crazy. And then we finally get the Ezra chapter I've been waiting for. Did I say it was Ezra or did I say it was Ezra? Like, I knew Ezra snatched her, but I didn't know why. And I knew Ezra was gonna have some problems, but then we find out, like, I love when books are, like, it's sort of gray. There's no bad and evil, or evil and good. People contain multitudes. I love when that happens, when you're like second guessing like who's on the bad side, because there is, like, in reality that's how it is too. There's no good and evil. People have all their meanings, and different meanings are good and different like reasons are bad. But I'm losing my mind. Oh, that was so good. So we find out that Ezra has been time jumping his entire life. So I was also like, yeah, okay, there it is. I knew something was off with him and I couldn't figure out what it was. So he could jump through time, which is sort of what Tristan can do, but not really. Tristan can just like control everything. He's just extremely powerful Superman. Ezra was born in like the 70s or something, which that was also an amazing start to his chapter. This is like the start of a new book. Like, that was like an amazing little hook right there when he was like, I was born as the world was dying or something. I was like, oh, tell them. So we find out that he was born in like the 70s and he grew up normally until he was like, I don't know, 7, 10, something like that, when his mom was shot in a religious building by a bad guy with a gun. I don't know. But he was able to slip through time and end up the morning before, and he just keeps reliving that day trying to prevent it, but realizes that he can't. And so he realizes that this is like a fixed moment that he can't change. And then from there he just sort of like jumps around until eventually he gets into magical NYU, where he goes and like learns stuff, but all of his professors are like, I wouldn't tell people what you could do because it's sort of too OP, but also like, we don't really know how to help you or train you because we don't know anything about what you do, so like, good luck. And so he just sort of like goes through school, whatever, but then he gets chosen for the SIX. And he's in the same year as Atlas. We don't find out the other people in Atlas's years. It's just Atlas and Ezra, who are sort of like the outsiders of the group, and they make a pact that they're like, we are not killing someone that's crazy, so they're like, let's just fake my death. So Ezra's like, we'll pretend I'm dead, and then I'll come back years later, and we will secure the bag. So that's what they do. Ezra fakes his death and then pops back like 5 years later or something. So now Atlas is 28 and Ezra's still 21, because that's how his time works. He's just jumping through time. And so they make this plan that they are going to take over the world together by taking over the society and then like restarting the world, which is freaking crazy. And so that's their plan all along. So this whole time they've been like manipulating who gets chosen for the Atlas 6, which I guess it wouldn't have been called the Atlas 6 before Alice, but whatever. I guess they have a couple years before we get to this present one that this book is about. The previous year is when they find Dalton, who's an animator, and Atlas is like, this guy's pretty cool, we're gonna keep him around because he's definitely gonna be useful later. And Ezra's just like, okay man, like whatever. And Ezra's just jumping around, he's bored as hell. He's just like zooming through time waiting for something to happen. And he says this line that like, I'm good at starving, Atlas is good at waiting. Like, ah! So then we find out that Atlas has specifically chosen these 6 people for this year to be like their super team, and he'd offered a spot to Ezra to like reinitiate Ezra into the whole society thing, but ends up Ezra's like, no, that's okay, like I already have access to the society, which is like literally the first thing I was thinking when he like broke in to get her. I was like, it must be one of the old initiates since it didn't set off any of the alarms. But then we later find out that Ezra also had like put a little doorway just for him that like no one would ever notice anyway, so there's also that. But I also feel like something about like the fact that he was already, I mean, he wasn't an initiate, but the fact that he was already one of the like chosens at one point should allow him in easier, but whatever. So we also find out that, so the year with Atlas and Ezra, no one died because they faked Ezra's death. So that whole thing was a lie. And then the year that Dalton did it, I guess someone did die. They didn't really care. They had them kill somebody off for the game, I guess. I don't know. But meanwhile, Atlas like controlled that situation and told Dalton to go kill somebody else. There's that. They also controlled this year, and they were planning on Callum dying because they were like, he is a terrible person. He's gonna destroy the world, so he needs to be killed. So he is the target choice, which is also such an interesting thing of the fact, like, they chose 6 people who are super powerful, knowing that one of them is the one that they want to be killed. Interesting. So interesting. There's so many, like, interesting thoughts going on in this book. And then Ezra has realized that over the years, Atlas has changed a little bit. He's, like, 40-something years old now. Ezra is still 21. He still hasn't even, like, experienced that many years. And he's like, oh, we're a little different now, and we don't really have the same, like, goals anymore. Ezra also was dating Libby on purpose because he wanted to get a feel for her or whatever. He found her and suggested her to Atlas because he was like, you're only gonna get Nico if you get Libby as well, because he understood the dynamic. And so he knows about all of the different people in this Atlas 6 year, this class, and he knows all their functions, and he realizes that Atlas is going to try to destroy the world and start it anew. And Ezra doesn't really like that idea anymore. So he goes back in time and creates the forum. This is so good. It's so good. So he creates the forum, which I guess Dalton is involved in. We still haven't fully understood that. The very last chapter of this book is from Dalton talking about how he could not control himself, how he was an animator and he couldn't control his own limits, and that's why he loves Atlas, because Atlas controls him. And that's the D. That's crazy. But I also have a feeling that somehow Dalton is involved in the forum, which is interesting because then does that mean that Atlas is playing like 4D chess, and Atlas put his version of Dalton in the forum, so he has a pawn on both sides, because Dalton is a pawn. That's all he is. It's so good. We also find out that Parisa is not being the right-hand man that Atlas wanted her to be, and that she's becoming too problematic. And Callum never died because he was supposed to and he didn't, but also no one died, so there was no sacrificial magic thing to the library. But we also find out that Atlas isn't getting all the information he wants from the library because the library withholds information that it doesn't want to give. He's going to use them to get information. Crazy. The book ends with finding out Ezra's whole current plan, where he zoomed into time into the Institute, snatched Libby, put her in a box basically that she can't escape from and doesn't know where it is in time or space, and leaves her there, and then goes off to talk to the forum, which is also made of 6 powerful people. One of them is like Nostradamus or something. I don't remember the name. It was a weird name that definitely came up earlier in the book, and I don't remember who that person was. But there's 6 people in the forum, and he's like, the symmetry. I'm like, shut the hell up. I'm so excited for the next book, and I need to read it right now. And I'm like losing my mind. This book was so good. This is a 5 stars for me. This is gonna be my new favorite book. Hands down. I'm putting it up there with my other, like, I'm going to be recommending this to everyone. I was obsessed. I don't understand why people are criticizing this. I'm gonna have to go read people's critiques, because I remember seeing it on BookTok and everyone was like really obsessed with it, but there was also a lot of people being like, this wasn't worth the hype. And how is this not worth the hype? This is the first book I've read in ages that has made me feel alive. Like, what is happening? I couldn't predict what was going on. It's so good. This is also, I would say, definitely Olivia Blake's best writing that I've read so far. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let me know if you equally are obsessed with this book, or let me know your critiques, because I am very curious why people aren't liking this one, but meanwhile are liking books like Fourth Wing. Like, guys, what's that about? We only do Fourth Wing slander in this house. Thank you guys for watching. Bye!